Good evening, guys. I hope you guys are well. So, I have this word that I want to put out for many of you guys today because the Lord highlighted to me something pertaining to an inheritance for many of his children. Okay. Now, there are some people who have already received some breakthroughs, and there are some people who are going to receive an upcoming breakthrough. I put out a word earlier today for someone that's about to receive a breakthrough. The Lord said they are heading into ownership of something pertaining to their restoration. Okay. Now, what the Lord also highlighted to me is that there's many of his children who have been witnessing the testimonies and the breakthroughs of others. And due to this has also caused them to be a bit weary. All right. And, oftentimes when you do get weary and you think that God forgot about you, or you're asking God, what about you? And you keep going through warfare after warfare after warfare, it's easy to think that the people that you're witnessing that are getting breakthroughs, it's easy to think that they're not going through anything, right? It's easy to think that their storms may have simmered, or their storms may have died down, or they're no longer going through storms. But what you have to understand is there's levels to breakthroughs. A person may receive the breakthrough of buying a new home, right? But they may still be battling something generational where they have a hard time sleeping at night because they have to consistently pray against a spirit or pray against witchcraft. Okay. Another person, they may, get a new job or something, and you may see them get that new job, but you may be like, wow, they're so blessed, they got their new job, what about me, God? And what you don't understand is, although they got that new job, they may not have a mother or a father or anyone that is holding them down through prayer and covering them. They're literally by themselves, right? And there may be someone else who just got married, and you may be like, God, what about me? How come I can't get married? I've been waiting for my kingdom marriage. But that person may be going through something pertaining to fertility, and that's their warfare, and they may not be able to conceive until later on, and they have to hold on to their promise from God, similar to like Sarah, right? So we never know what others are going through behind the scenes, and it's so important to never compare our lives or our breakthroughs with others. Okay. Now, another thing that God wanted me to highlight to many of you guys is, we have to understand that before us, the prophets and the anointed before us, they went through similar battles, similar struggles. Okay, so we're not the first ones going through this, right? Also, remember something. Not only did they have to battle this, but so did your generation. So did the generation before you. So did the generation before your mother and father. So did the generation before your great grandparents. Your ancestors also had to go through this, right? Here's the big test. Now, see, the difference between you guys and your ancestors is, a lot of you guys, your ancestors folded. They conformed, right? Satan got to them. Satan's mind games and his tricks, and, them being in the wilderness, and them trying to break the generational cycles, and them saying, you know what, forget it. I'm walking away from God. I forget this. I'm turning to witchcraft, or I'm turning to ancestral worship, or I'm turning to this, I'm turning to that, and completely disregarding God is why many of you guys today are fighting the type of warfare you're fighting, because you are breaking a lineage, a covenant that they refuse to break, a covenant that they folded to, because the persecution became too tough for them. So many of you guys, what's swept under the rug, you guys are having to fight it and deal with it, so the next generation after you doesn't have to deal with it, right? But what God wants to also remind you is he doesn't want you to make the same mistakes that your ancestors did. He doesn't want you to fold like they did. He doesn't want you to say, I want to go back to Egypt. Remember when Moses saved the Israelites from Egypt, and the Israelites were in the wilderness period for some time, and they started to complain to God, and they said, you know what, I don't want to do this no more. It was better off when we were in Egypt. And they said they wanted to go back to Egypt because they didn't want to, go through what they were going through anymore. Right? Not realizing that God is literally saving their life. God literally has a promise for them. Now, God has a promise for many of you guys. And what Satan's trying to do is he's trying to get you to have a similar mindset as the Israelites that left Egypt. Remember, God showed them the promise, right? And told them what the promise was. But it was they were being impatient. And not only that, but it was the wilderness became too much for them. They wanted to conform. They ended up conforming. And when they conformed, what happened? They went through all of that for no reason, and they weren't even able to touch the promise. That's what happened to many of your ancestors. They conformed just like the Israelites conformed, which is why many of them were not able to touch what it is that you're supposed to touch in this generation, in this lifetime. But what the enemy's trying to do is he's trying to get you to fold, and he's trying to get you to throw in the towel before you could even touch the promise that God has promised you. Now, everyone's promise, everyone's breakthrough is different, right? Everyone's promise, everyone's breakthrough is different. But just like God showed the Israelites what they were heading to and what he had for them, but they conformed, God showed you what he has for you, whether it be vision or dream. He showed you. And many of you guys, because you're focused on the promises of others and what others are receiving, and the warfare is getting too tough, some of you guys are thinking about throwing in the towel. Some of you guys are like, I don't want to do this no more. Some of you guys are thinking about walking away from God, or you think about walking away from praying. You haven't been praying, you haven't been fasting because you're just so like, I'm tired, God. And God understands that you're tired. He knows that you're tired. He gets it. But also he wants you to recognize the tricks of the enemy and recognize what Satan is trying to do. The repetitive patterns of what happened to your already ancestors that already made these mistakes, right? Which is why you are in the position you're in today. God doesn't want you to fall into the same trap. So I'm going to read this to you. This is Hebrews 2. It says here, we must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. So what God is telling you is, whatever I have already promised you, whatever I have shown you already via vision and dream, pay very close attention to what you already heard. Pay very close attention to what you already saw, and not just pay attention to what you heard pertaining to your promise, but pay attention to what you have already heard. What happened to the Israelites who rebelled, who conformed, who could no longer, hold on to the promise that God had for them. Pay attention to what you already heard, what he has already showed you. There's a reason why history has shown to us what has happened, so we don't make the same mistakes. Pay attention to what you heard. Look at your lineage. Look at your lineage. The amount of women and men that didn't get married, the amount of broken homes, the amount of poverty, the amount of witchcraft, the amount of divination. All that came from those who drifted away, right? And the Lord is telling you to be careful and to pay very close attention. Do not fold. Do not fold. And what he means by that, he's not saying you have to be perfect. He's not saying you can't complain and you can't cry. What he is saying is your heart. Let your heart stay with him. Continue to believe in him. Okay? Because that's what the enemy's trying to do. He's trying to make the warfare so tough that you no longer want to believe in God, that you no longer want to keep your heart right with God, that you no longer believe, and that you completely just disregard every promise and everything he has shown you. Once that happens, you have drifted away. You're allowed to be a human being, but there's a difference between I'm being a human being, I'm crying, God, I still believe in your promise, I still have faith in you, but I'm just crying because I need to cry, I'm a little bit frustrated, versus I'm done, I don't want to pray no more, I don't believe in God no more, I don't believe in your promise no more, I'm done. There's a big difference. You see the difference? You see the difference? One is weariness and having faith just as small as a mustard seed. The other is hardened heart and completely walking away and drifting away. And that is what your ancestors did. That is why you have witchcraft going on in your family and nobody has broken it until you came. That is why there was a poverty curse and no one has broken it until you came. That is why there was a marital curse and nobody broke it until you came. So what Satan's trying to do is he's trying to get you to fold. He's trying to get you to follow the same footsteps as your ancestors. And let me tell you something. Many people don't understand. Listen, Satan's mind games don't work with certain people. Because we know all his tactics now. And we're here to teach y'all on his tactics. You see the witchcraft that many of you guys are fighting in your family, and people keep doing black magic or obi or whatever they're doing to you? Do you know that the witchcraft is already affecting them? What they did to you is already affecting them? That's why they're still doing it. Because had the witchcraft not been affecting them, they wouldn't continue to be paying. Had it worked on you, they wouldn't have to continue to pay, because it would have been working from the very beginning. That's why they have to keep paying and keep paying and keep feeding the altar and keep going and going, because you know why? It's not working. It's actually affecting them. That's why they keep doing the same patterns of wickedness, because it has already bounced back on them. So you know what it is now? Because they know they can't kill you. They know they can't take your inheritance. They know they can't block God's promise for your life. Do you know what they have to do? They have to try to continue to frustrate you. You know that saying, poking the bear until the bear snaps? That's what it is. They have to try to continue to poke you and poke you and poke you until you get so frustrated you snap. And guess what? You conform like they did. They want you to follow their footsteps. They want you to walk away from God. They want you to get so tired of what they're doing and what you're going through in the warfare that you follow their footsteps and block your own blessings. And then guess what? God can't give you what he promised you. Why? Because you drifted away like the Israelites did, right? Do you not see the repetitive pattern of history? That's what it is. And that's why God says, remember what you already heard. Be very careful and remember what you already heard. Because it says here in the book of Hebrews that God is not a liar. God is not a liar. If he promised you something, he will give it to you. But what they're trying to do, the only way he can't give it to you is if you fold and you no longer believe and you lose your faith and you drift away and your heart completely goes hardened. Like the father, like the mother, like the aunt, like the uncle, like the sister, like the brother, like the great grandma, like the great grandfather, the generations before you. That's the only way they can block you, is by getting you to fold. It's a tactic. Again, you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to question why you have to go through what you're going through. You're allowed to break down. But you have to continue to believe and have faith and continue to keep your heart upright. That's the key. That is the key. I'm telling you. That's why God showed us an example of Jesus. That's why he sent Jesus. Let me read this to you. Jesus is the perfect example of a man who was blameless, who has done no wrong, yet he was persecuted beyond what we could even imagine and beyond what we could even endure ourselves is what happened to him. So God allowed that to happen to him. Why? So he can, one, save us, but also to show us that if this can happen to his own son, and Jesus still received his promise, his eternal glory of becoming high priest and the king of all kings, then you have to remember what Father promised you. Not only your rewards in heaven, but whatever he promised you here, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do not fold. Do not throw in the towel. Keep your heart upright. You see, there's a lot of people that claim to be Christians and they're gossiping and they're tearing on other people and they're very cold and bitter. And you're like, how could you be a Christian when you're bitter? They conformed. A lot of people, when they conform and they block their own blessings, they try to get you to block yours. Because they see your heart. They see that you have not conformed. Oh, let me read that to you. Let me read it to you right now. Hold on. So this is Hebrews 2, verse 17. I'm going to go on, but let me read this to you first. For this season he had been made like them. This is Jesus. Fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of people, because he himself suffered when he was tempted. He was able to help those who are being tempted. Glory. Now this is verse 3. Verse 3. Jesus had been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. And this is number 6. But Christ is faithful as the Son over God's house, and we are his house. If indeed we hold firmly to our confidence, if only we hold firmly to our what? Our confidence. And to what? To the hope in which we glory. See, it says here, we just have to hold on to our confidence and our hope. And what is confidence? Confidence is faith. Confidence is faith. And the Bible even says, faith just as small as a mustard seed. See, once you give up that little bit of faith that you have, you've turned into the very same people who are trying to destroy you. You see that? And a lot of them, they know they can't destroy you. So they're trying to poke to get you to walk away from your glory, from your promise, from your faith, from your belief, so you can end up like them. It's a tactic. So that's why it says here, warning against unbelief. This is Hebrews 3, verse 7. So as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, and this, he's speaking right now. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. He's talking to some of you. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the wilderness. So he's talking about your ancestors. When they were in their testing through the wilderness, they hardened their hearts. Many of you guys, you're in the wilderness right now. And I brought up Daniel 4 today in the other message, and said that the king in Daniel 4 had to go in the wilderness himself, because he had to break ancestral covenants too, right? And God had to cut down that tree. He had to go in the wilderness, and God had to rebuild a whole new tree, which is restoration. But before that tree was restored, bigger and greater than what it was originally, he had to be in the wilderness, and he couldn't fold while he was in the wilderness. See, many of the people in your family that are fighting curses and bloodline and all that, they swept the problems under the rug. You know why? They conformed. You know why? They rebelled. And many of them think, okay, if I just pretend like it doesn't exist, then okay. And this is why you see them sitting in the church, but they can't get married. Sitting in the church, they're still fighting poverty, because they did not face the root of the issue. In fact, they disregarded it and kept it under the rug and ignored it. They ignored it. And their hearts are not right. And God is telling you, do not fall into the same trap. Do not harden your heart. He chose you for a reason. He chose you for a reason. Do not harden your hearts, as you did in the rebellion during the time of the testing in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested and tried me. Though for 40 years they saw what I did. That is why I was angry with that generation. I said, their hearts are always going astray, and they have not known my ways. I declared an oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. So to wit, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. You see, what that's saying is, like, do not harden your heart and turn away from God. And this is why we are to encourage each other as God's people. The other day I saw a video online, and somebody was saying that they're just so upset with God, and they're so tired and frustrated with God. And that person has all right. to speak their mind and speak their opinion, right? But I started to see a lot of people coming into agreement with that. And there was people that literally were holding on to a little bit of faith while going through their wilderness, while going through their period of trials. And that video alone could have made some people say, you know what, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm frustrated, right? And again, we're all responsible for our own actions, right? But it's so important that we continue to believe and we hold on to our faith no matter what. No matter what, because what Satan's trying to do is he's trying to get us to fold like our ancestors did. He's trying to get us to fold like the Israelites did and turn away from God. And listen, turning away from God also means you sitting in the church, you reading the Bible, you preaching, but your heart ain't with him. You see that? That's why we have this today. That's why this is so popular today, where everybody's preaching, but they don't really know God. Their hearts have turned away from him a long time ago, right? So what this is also saying is, do not let sin's deceitfulness, the warfare, everything that you're going through, trick you into turning away from God. That's why Jesus had to go through far worse, because he is our brother. He is setting an example for us. We are God's children. He is setting an example for us. Hebrews 3, number 16. Who were they who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those Moses led out of Egypt? And with whom was he angry for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies perished in the wilderness? And then number 19 says, so we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. See, they knew what promise God had for them, but because of their unbelief, they were not able to receive the promise. Imagine being Moses, being disobedient to God, and being able to see the promise literally with your eyes, but you can't enter. Imagine that. And that's what God is trying to tell you. Like, remember what I told you. Remember what you heard. I'm showing you the promise. I'm telling you what I have for you. Do not let the sins and the deceitfulness of sin and warfare trick you out of your position. Okay? So number 4, therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful. The promise still stands. So he's saying, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had good news proclaimed to us just as they did. But the message they heard was no value to them because they did not share the faith of those who obeyed. Stay obedient, okay? Just want to share this with you guys. Keep the faith and don't fold. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.